Hello everyone and welcome to another new movie review. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Brandon.
Brandon and I just went to Now You See Me, and this is a film that we walked into knowing very little about. It is directed by Louis Leterrier. I know I'm pronouncing that name incorrectly.
And I have no idea how to pronounce it.
I need to, at some point, look up how that's actually pronounced. It produced, interestingly, by Orty and Kurtzman. They did not write the film. The film was written by some folks I don't know. Ed Sullivan, Bose Yakin, and Edward Record. Yeah, no, Solomon.
Oh.
Yeah. And anyway, the film is starring a gaggle of popular actors, including Mark Ruffalo, Woody Harrelson, Jesse Eisenberg. A really interesting, eclectic kind of cast.
It was, but I think that added to the movie. And
I was surprised to see both Michael Caine and Morgan Freeman in the film.
As was I.
Together again, especially given that this is a film about magic, and we've got Michael Caine, who is in the Prestige, and I almost couldn't help, and this is maybe not fair to the film, I almost couldn't help thinking the Prestige from the moment the film started, yeah. We'll talk about that a little bit. The movie is about a quartet of magicians that are all famous and impressive in their own right, and each of them gets a tarot card from some mysterious benefactor that pulls them all together to see if they can all work together to perform one big, massive, amazing magic trick to ultimately become part of this big inner magic circle called the Eye, which we don't know whether or not at the beginning of the film if it's a real thing or not.
Right.
It's said to be fictitious.
But it's also based a lot in ancient history, and I thought that was a very interesting point, but yes.
Most of the movie is kind of a cat and mouse chase of these four trying to perform their massive, somewhat convoluted magic trick that goes between three enormous venues and involves a lot of crime. And much of it is robbing banks and stealing money from various places and making it look like they did it in supernatural ways. And the question throughout the whole movie is mostly, did they do it through basic, regular, not basic, but through, regular misdirection, like real magic is done, or if there is some kind of supernatural component to it. That's kind of the question throughout the whole film. We follow, through a lot of the movie, Mark Ruffalo, who plays what seems to be an incredibly incompetent FBI agent throughout the whole movie. And
does it really seem like he's incompetent?
Yeah,
we'll talk about that.
I mean that's what we're supposed to think.
I suppose.
But anyway, by the end of the movie, I gotta say, I thought it was okay. I felt like the script left, the screenwriting left a lot to be desired. Overall, the actual, magic and everything, the big plot they were trying to pull off, I thought was incredibly convoluted, and I understand that it was supposed to be difficult to follow, but part of the problem I had was caring about it. All the way through, I felt like there was this attempt at mixing this, this intriguing how do they do all this magic plot with these characters that I'm supposed to care for, but they're too wooden. And I thought that the movie was hanging very hard on star power. It was. I will agree with that. It had these great actors who were all doing a great job with material that was beneath all of them. I thought. What do you think?
I kind of came out of the movie thinking, well, it was an okay movie. I had a couple of problems, and namely, as I've been watching a lot of Through the Wormhole with Morgan Freeman lately, and not kidding you, this has about as much narration by Morgan Freeman in it as Through the Wormhole with Morgan Freeman. It kind of felt like it Through the Wormhole with Morgan Freeman about magic.
That's hilarious.
Instead of the universe. Seriously, honestly, I did like the movie. It was okay in my book, but one of the things I had a big problem with.
So you're recommending the film?
I would recommend the film.
Wow, really?
But not in the theater.
Okay, all right.
I would actually
you say wait for video.
A weekend movie, maybe.
Yeah. Okay.
Just if you need something to do, check it out. But the biggest problem I had was the fact that we're supposed to believe that these are magicians, and all we're seeing are Hollywood effects.
That was the biggest problem I have with it.
I'm not saying that magicians aren't using effects, But this is clearly Hollywood.
Well, when you say Hollywood, you're talking about visual effects versus practical effects.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
I really think the first rule of thumb when you're making a movie about magic, and you're in especially stage magic, is do tricks that look like they're really happening.
Yes.
So much of it was clearly really fake-looking CGI, and that took me out of the film from the very beginning.
It did the same thing to me. There's a scene. I won't give anything away other than the fact that one of the characters is floating above the stage. I was totally out of it at that point. I was like, this is obviously a Hollywood effect.
Yeah, are you talking about the bubble?
I am.
Yeah, I felt the same thing with that, but I had a lot of that way before that.
Me too. Me too.
The first disappearing effect with the device that's supposed to be a transporter, it looks entirely fake.
See, I didn't feel that so much with that device. I could tell what was happening.
But the problem was, right before it, you had a CGI curtain that was floating all over the stage, and that immediately took me out.
That immediately took me out.
And so at that point, my mind couldn't help it. I was looking for stuff. At that point, I was looking for the CG, and I feel like for something like this, the stage magic ought to be mesmerizing us, the audience, as much as it would be the real audience there. And so it made the whole thing feel incredibly implausible to me. As it was, I thought that that a lot of the way the tricks were supposed to be done were implausible anyway.
Really?
And I feel like anybody that really knows anything about magic, I'm not one of them, but I will say I've been watching a lot of magic shows and things lately. It just happens to be something I've been looking into lately. And I feel like anybody that actually knows anything about stage magic is probably going to watch this movie and be insulted by it.
That's a fair assumption.
I really had that. The biggest one for me was mentalism. There were a lot of there were a lot of bits in the movie where I just thought it was implausible. There were a lot of bits in the film where the elaborate setup of how an illusion was done was possible, if not incredibly difficult to plan ahead of time.
Right.
But what didn't work was all of the mentalism stuff where people were where like any person that guy wanted to hypnotize was hypnotized easily and to do anything he wanted them to do, and a lot of those tricks hinged on that. Yes. And I felt like they were making that out to be a lot simpler than it is. And I'm not saying that I don't believe at all in hypnotism,
right?
But I thought that this was a little bit absurd, and I didn't feel like the universe they were creating was a heightened enough universe where suddenly the rules are different than they are in the real world. I felt like it wanted to play with the real world, and it wasn't really working.
It wasn't working. There were some big problems in the fact that certain tasks that they needed to perform for these tricks were contingent upon certain other things working that you cannot be certain they're going to work.
Yeah.
And in fact, the end reveal shows that this has been in the works for, well, they talk in the movie about planning for a long time and how things are set up well in advance. I won't tell you just how far in advance, but well in advance, just to say. And I think you can't, for things like this to work, you cannot plan that far in advance. It just becomes impossible to then make an assumption that what you planned is going to even work in the end, because your other variables are too fragile.
I thought there were a number of convenient facts that were dropped to try to prove that they had done their research on both history and stage magic. I felt like there were a lot of places where somebody would say some factoid so that you and the audience would think, oh, the movie knows what it's doing. But then there were very basic kinds of things with the magic where I was going, this isn't written by people that know magic. It's written by people that did a little bit of offhand research, and they're kind of throwing that in. It felt...
How many magicians did they consult?
Yeah, well, and who, they might have, but they didn't. But I'm just saying, it didn't seem like they got it.
Right. It's obvious that magicians weren't writing this. It was Hollywood writing a script about magicians.
Yeah, and I mean, like that, and that's fine, and it could, that could be made to work. I don't feel like it happened here. I also feel like there were several places with dialogue, and this is gonna be a little bit harsh, where it felt a little bit like a high school stage play. I really had that, and you've got Morgan Freeman, who is, I mean, calling him a veteran actor is an understatement.
True.
Morgan Freeman is amazing, and he's struggling with this material to make it sound natural. I felt like the majority of the dialogue was not natural dialogue, and there were places where I was kind of laughing out loud at things I wasn't supposed to be.
I can see where they're coming from.
So yeah, I am personally not recommending this film. I enjoyed things about it, and
Sure.
and I liked the ending better than I thought I would. Where things finally go, somewhat impressed me. With the final reveal of who was behind it all.
Yeah, that was impressive. As far as what happened immediately after the reveal, I don't know what was going on with that.
I didn't need that. I also thought there were too many characters.
There were a number of characters, superfluous characters.
I thought Michael Caine was wasted.
That was kind of a total waste.
I felt like about anybody could have played that role.
I wonder how much they had to pay him just for that. And
Yeah.
that was a poor, not a poor performance. He was working with what he had.
And it was fine. I'm just saying that anybody could have played that role.
They didn't write him. They didn't write him well enough.
You said how much would they have to pay him? I was just looking at this. It was only $75 million budget. It was a very small budget for. Comparatively for what it is, and far too many visual effects shots.
That's right.
For that budget, given the kind of material it is, I would have appreciated seeing a lot more of that, if not all of it, to be practical effects. And I'll also say this: too much kind of obligatory action.
Yeah.
In a film that really didn't need it. There was a giant car chase in this movie. We didn't need a giant car chase.
Why is this an action film?
Yeah, they try to fit it into the rest of the big giant convoluted magic trick.
They tried to fit it into the misdirection thing.
And didn't you feel like there was a lot of that with all the misdirection?
There was a lot of misdirection.
You and I would sit there and think, well, now why do we need this in this movie? And then they would kind of explain it to you later. Like, oh, you didn't need that.
Including the final bit of misdirection on the rooftop. It really made the movie fall apart in a sense. It pulls you directly out of the movie and makes you realize you're in a movie theater. And it made me actually, and I saw you looking around too. I looked around a couple times just to see how many other people were pulled out of the movie like I was.
People weren't involved.
They weren't. In fact, I would say that actually the most interesting thing about this movie-going experience was the woman that was sitting a few seats down from us. She was pretty good looking.
Oh, Brandon. Well, that tells you how much attention Brandon was paying and how sucked into the narrative he was. I also thought there was some odd editing stuff in this movie.
Yeah.
There's some great cinematography. There's some really nice shots and interesting choices during. Well, honestly, within the first 20-30 minutes, mostly some cool crane stuff.
Yeah.
But there were some weird choices in editing where a couple of scenes would be jumping back and forth from each other that I found somewhat confusing to begin with, and then I went, oh, that's what they're doing. Yeah. And then I wondered, why are they doing that? Where they think they're doing some interesting paralleling, but it's kind of obvious and not that interesting.
I would agree with you, but let me ask you this. I want to ask you this. What do you think, would you agree with me if I said that I thought the biggest budgeted single effect in the movie was the first effect they did with the smoke and the laser lights?
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're probably right.
And
that was immediately the thing that took me out.
Yeah, because that was the first thing. That was the first thing that pulled me completely out of the movie.
If you're making a movie that's all about misdirection, obviously you want to do that also on the grand scale of playing with your audience a little bit and misdirecting us. Mm-hmm. And the film is trying to do that narratively, but visually it struggles because I don't wonder how anything's done.
Right.
And I kept feeling like I should be wondering that a little bit. Now, I understand that I'm supposed to be questioning throughout the film, or at least this is my read on it. I do feel like I'm supposed to be questioning throughout the movie whether or not any of it is supernatural or if it's all actually just illusion. But that could be much better handled if I, as an audience goer, didn't know how the movie makers did what they were doing.
Right.
And I could always tell. I feel like if this movie was made 15 years ago, it would have been a better film, just because they would have had to think a little harder about how to make some of those effects happen.
I would absolutely agree with you on that note. And I guess the biggest thing we're going to hit on is the fact that it kept pulling us out.
Yeah.
And
that would have been easier to swallow if I was also invested in characters, and there wasn't a single person in this movie I was invested in.
That's okay. The movie was trying to do that intentionally, but it was doing it incredibly badly. I think we're supposed to have this sense that these characters are ragtag in their own right. They know what they're doing in each of their respective fields. At least one of them was more famous before and had hit hard times. Most of them are, not giving anything away here, I don't think, street performers. And they're brought together, and at that point, we're kind of supposed to get the fact that their kind of lives have been shrouded because they've been running on the streets, you know, doing their magic here on the streets, and they really don't have backstory. It doesn't work. Just flat out didn't work for me.
Yeah, well, and it's a lot of it is stereotypes, and it's not, and it's not that kind of movie. The movie is it's not a melodrama. The movie is wanting us to be invested in some of these characters. As I said, I feel like there's too many of them. I feel like there are too many long stretches where the quartet isn't even in the film. And you kind of forget about them a little bit. So it's like, okay, who is the protagonist, or who are the dual protagonists? And I also recognize that at various points in the movie, the film wants us to be confused about who's on whose side.
Right.
But the thing is, if I'm not invested in any character, in any one character or even multiple characters, I'm not going to be as surprised or care even that I'm surprised when I find out, oh, this person is really on this side or whatever. And then ultimately, were we ever really surprised by any of that? Not until the very end.
I was disappointed, in fact, by can I call it the D story of the possible love interest. I was actually disappointed by that.
It was conventional. It was wasted. It was unnecessary.
It was conventional, but I had no feeling for the characters involved
whatsoever. No, I didn't.
Really, and more to the point on the misdirection. I'd like to hit on this. In magic, more than misdirection, I feel like there's supposed to be a subterfuge. Like, you're being misdirected, but also you're supposed to believe what's being told to you by the magician more than you're supposed to get a Hollywood effect. And there was more Hollywood effect than there was subterfuge. There was plenty of misdirection, but it's the subterfuge, not the Hollywood effect, that completes the trick.
Well, that's right, but I think the point there is that the film, I don't think, is ever actually trying to trick the audience, and that's the problem. Is that they ought to be they're separating us too far from.
You're right. They're not trying to trick us. They're trying to show us how they're performing this trick. And that's not what we really wanted.
Yeah, I mean, they think they're being very clever when they're explaining exactly how the magicians do the big giant stuff, but just the straight up on the stage tricks they're doing, I want to be surprised by them. I want to be able to put myself in the audience at that point, or I want to be in with their heads. I'm not in either of those places, so I'm in limbo. I don't know where I'm supposed to be. Am I with the protagonists, if we can even call them that in this film, or am I in that stage audience? I found myself out in the ether, and that's why I was never really taken in by the film.
Me too. If I wanted to see a movie with some action in it that I wasn't going to be really heavily invested in, I would have gone and seen Fast 6.
Yeah, because I know you wanted to see that.
I did want to see that, but we had a couple of ideas on what to go see, and I wanted to see this movie as well. Just didn't turn out to be what I thought it was going to be. And that's not to say, like I said earlier, that I would recommend it on a certain level. The level is not pay money to go see it in a movie theater.
But would you agree with me if I were to say that if this was a cast of nobodies, you would have cared about it a lot less walking out of the theater?
Yes.
I mean, it was relying hard, in my opinion, on those actors we recognize.
It was, and it would not make the career of anyone.
Well, yeah, that's a good point.
So
there's some funny bits. I mean, Woody Harrelson does some things that are amusing.
as
But
he is capable of doing.
But there's not a
anything.
single role in that movie that couldn't have been played by far less actors than what they had.
That's true. And it would have never been released if that had been the case.
It would have been direct-to-video. Well, everybody, thanks as always for watching, and we'll try to bring you something again very soon. Another new movie. We're definitely going to see Man of Steel, so that'll probably be the next thing that we talk about doing new movie reviews. Thanks as always for watching. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Brandon.
See you next time.